Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, FF family. Today is Friday, March 14th, and we're on episode 16. All about today is regulation, inflation, and the economy. So, my name is Dylan. I'm going to be your host. I'm here with Bradley and Nick as always, and we're going to be breaking this down. Before we do, though, we're back at it again. So, we have our, I guess you could say, draft pick of our stocks. This is update number 2. Is that right?
3.
3.
Yeah, I think.
Oh,
3.
man. Well, we've been going through it a lot, and I can definitely tell you that someone's been bragging before we got in this call and during it. So, as always, I'm going to start with Nick here. So, Nick, just the update for yours first. Your total is $91,507.29 so far. If anybody keeps track at home, we started at 100,000, so not looking good. Down.
Is this a golf situation where like less is more?
Oh, no,
I like that.
No, it's not. It's not. We can't change. As day 3, we're going into this. We're down 8.49%. Your biggest winner was Pfizer, going up 1%.
Okay.
Your biggest loser was Bitcoin, barely by $4 more than Amazon. It totaled down 15.7%. Nick, not to rub salt in the room, but what's happening, man? What insights you got?
Hey, I think, if you look at Bitcoin over time, it kind of has these cycles. And so I think we're coming down so we can have a big old jump up. And, Amazon is getting hit kind of hard right now, maybe unfairly. So I think, I think they'll come back in the long run. So I'm down, but I'm not out. I still have faith.
Yeah, small business Amazon really getting hit by the man here for sure. Yeah, it's hard out here.
Poor Amazon.
Poor Jeff.
All right. Yeah, hopefully we can help subsidize in some way. Bradley, we're up to you. So, Bradley, going to you. So you are also down. Let's be real. Total change, you're at $94,441.40 you are down a total of 5.56%. This is not like golf, so you are technically in the lead right now. Your biggest winner, BRKB Berkshire Fund, 9%. Your biggest loser, Tesla, minus 25.7%. I think the biggest headline right now is Tesla. So why do you think it's going down still? What's going on?
Tesla got really, Tesla was kind of like the poster boy of the bad market over the last 2.5 weeks, which is funny because Nick was talking about earlier how the how the stock market went up today. Well, Tesla went up a couple days, it started a little before. It started going down before the rest of the stock market went down, and it started going up before the rest of the stock market going up. But dang, I'm down over $2,500, over 25% on Tesla. It's just getting crushed. I said this last week, though. If Tesla has good profits on their next quarterly report, then expect all of that to kind of go away, right? Like people talk about sentiment, political sentiment, or, economic policy. Revenues overrides everything. But, Tesla, I'm looking at, I would think with just Tesla alone, I should be losing against Nick. But, yeah, it's rough out there for Tesla.
Now, just for keeping track at home, you mentioned about revenues for Tesla. Are they going to have a quarterly report of some side before our competition ends?
I think so, yeah. I think they'll have one in April, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure on the exact date, though.
Well, a little homework for both of you. Double check when that report's coming out, so that way you can be like, hey, I might be down this much, but revenue. I'm telling you, it's going to be big.
But then if they have bad revenue, I'm screwed. If they don't hit their sales.
Nick's like, man, I hope one more gets attacked again, so that way I can finally bring him down.
I know, right?
So why is Berkshire Fund going up? What's on with that?
I don't know.
Good insight.
I would think that it would go along with everything else in the S&P. Because there's a lot of major business investments in there, and it should be going down. So it's kind of an anomaly in my mind. Like I don't get it. I don't understand what's happening right now, to be honest. Like it's a little wild out there.
I think it might be something like Coke's gone up like crazy in the last like month or two.
Yes.
Maybe people are flocking to some of those safer investments.
That's a very good point. It is safer. Like I feel like I actually have tiny bit safer. Like I went a little safer than you did, Nick, because I have Coke. I have a CD. I have McDonald's. So you might be right. I have Ford.
Yeah.
Well, let's ask this. So, is Coke considered? Oh my gosh, is Coke still considered a dividend king?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
I think they've had 50 or 60 years.
Yeah, I don't think they've
for everyone.
changed their dividend.
Probably not. For anyone that doesn't know, Nick, what's a dividend king?
Well, a dividend aristocrat is a company who has sorry, it's a company who's increased their dividends every single year for at least 25 years.
25 years.
Perfect. See, that's why these two are there, and I'm the host. That's why that's happening here.
The star of the show.
That's right. I'm the looks. So the dividend aristocrat, for everyone who doesn't know, there you go. With that being said, Nick, do better. Bradley, you're doing great again.
No,
I'm really proud of
not
you.
Doing as bad.
I know you just own the place, so I'm legally required to tell you that. So we're going back into, once again, regulation, inflation, and the economy. A lot of updates. Some of this we talked about last week, going into this week. So we're going to discuss what basically the state of the economy and if we're seeing improvement or not. So, Nick, I'm going to shoot it off to you first here. So everyone knows about DOGE. You've heard it in a headline. You've heard about it. There's no way you haven't in this past month, at least, basically since the administration started. So DOGE has made some quick cuts, found some spending that they felt was unnecessary for the U.S. budget, and it's 36 plus trillion in debts. Now, is this affecting the stock markets at all?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting, right? Did a little bit of research on this, and there's very conflicting numbers on what DOGE is saving. I've seen as low as like $600 million, and I've seen as high as $55 billion, right? So let's just go on the high side and say they've saved $55 billion. And don't get me wrong, I love the thought process and the idea of what they're doing, but our debt, $36.5 trillion, right? So I don't like these giant numbers, so I'm gonna reduce them down to like an average household income, right? So let's say that the household of the United States has $36,000 in debt. That means our spending is $6,800 a year, and we make $4,900 a year. We just said, hey, I found $55 I don't have to spend. And that's gonna make the difference on my $36,000 in debt when I'm making less than $5 grand. So like
that's not
again,
a lot.
It's not,
I did the math.
It's not a lot. Like, hey, I'm not gonna buy Starbucks for a couple weeks. Like, no, I love what they're doing, but how can you say that little tiny drop in the bucket is going to really have an impact? Like maybe long term, maybe if we continue to tighten it a little bit. But when you think about the interest on our national debt is $1 trillion a year, just the interest on the debt that we already owe, and $55 billion is like, I don't know, are we're what are we tripping over dollars to pick up pennies or something like that? Like, I don't know. It doesn't, I don't see it making an impact, if I'm being honest.
I do have two things to this, and Bradley, maybe you can shed some insight on it or shed some light. First, I've read some headlines. DOGE is this unelected entity that's taken over the government by storm. They're dropping people left and right. First of all, is it illegal for what DOGE is doing? Are you aware of that? Has this ever happened before with the economy? And two, with it, I think you've done a video on this particular subject about our debt on our website / YouTube channel, and I believe there's a short available.
Yeah.
Can you shed some insight on those two things?
Yeah, so let's start with the big number of 36 point whatever trillion. I think in the video it was if you made $500 million a year and you put all that money towards the debt, how many years would it take you to pay it off? Well, the answer is like 77,000 years is how long it would take to pay off.
$55 saved, baby.
Yeah. If you were to make $10,000 an hour for the last 2,025 years, and you worked every single hour of every single day, every day of the week, every week of the year, you would have about like what, $150 billion, which is about 0.49% of the actual deficit. So like, Nick, when you broke it down to $36,000, that's a great way to break it down. But the number 36 trillion is way bigger than anyone could ever think about. You know, like, I think it's like it takes a few minutes or a few hours to count to 1 million, but it takes 34 years to count to 1 billion. How long does it take to count to 1 trillion, right? So like these numbers are astronomically large, and like Dylan and I were talking on a personal note the other day about like how do you think DOGE is doing? Like, they have to cut more, and we have to spend more, or we have to get revenues more. And like another note with the video that you said, Dylan, if you were to just like steal all the money from the top 10 richest people in the world, put it towards our debt, it would cover about 5% of our debt, like 1.5 trillion or 2.5 trillion. So like the numbers, unfortunately, just aren't there because that number is so astronomically large. But what DOGE is doing is not illegal. It has been done before. As recent as Barack Obama times, like he had put in like accountants. It just wasn't a huge deal, right? Like Donald Trump and Elon Musk are very divisive people. So like they rub people the wrong way, and it was a huge deal, and it was a very divisive election. So people just like kind of pointed out. But Barack Obama, like that point you were talking about, Nick, of like, hey, we just saved $55. I remember when Barack Obama was trying to cut the budget, and like kind of like how like one side's against the other side now, like you're not doing enough, or like you're not working. It was the other way around. Barack Obama wasn't doing enough when our deficit was like 16 trillion. He was like, okay, I saved $600 million on like chairs and pencils for like federal workers, and people are like, okay, $600 million, that's just a drop in the bucket. So and we've had departments, the budget of the Bureau, I think I've talked about before, in 1921, I think Warren Harding set up. So it's not illegal. It has been done before, and the same criticisms have been applied that it's not enough, and everyone is right. It's not enough money because $36 trillion is astronomically large, and it's not doing anything unless something fundamentally changes.
Yeah, I think the biggest change you can do with any company, just regardless of the government, is to cut employees, and I think that's what they're targeting right now. So it kind of just follows the company logic. Nick, you said you liked what they're doing, so what are some more insights, if you have any, regarding DOGE? Do you feel like there's anything more outside of the $55 saved?
Yeah, I think if I could like wave a magic wand and like what could DOGE actually accomplish, I mean, sure, if they keep saving money, like great, but I think the idea of government being accountable to what they're spending, if there's policies and processes implemented there, some sort of checks and balances, budget oversight, like I think that could create a system where we're not in the mess that we're in right now. Does that help us eliminate $36 trillion in debt? Like, not anytime soon, but when you're thinking about like the income from, tax revenue and things like that versus what we spend, we're adding $2 trillion to the national debt on average, just at our current pace. Like you got to somehow get that down. 55 billion just ain't going to cut it right now, but it could lead to some things that could get us in a little bit of a different scenario that might help us down the road. And I think that's a healthy place to be in.
Gotcha. Well, I think that's pretty much good on DOGE for now. So, Bradley, I'm going to pass it to you now. So the CPI report from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics came out this week with positive news. Inflation was down 0.3%. So I think with that, a lot of people hear that First, I think some people are like, I don't know what a CPI report is. So if you can fill us in from there, that would be great. But to follow it up with, we're going to see inflation slow down for good.
Yeah.
Seeing the work of the Federal Reserve go down, like, do you feel like it's too early if we were to lower like interest rates? Where are you feeling? Are we too early down the line? So what's going on?
So it's good news because I think everyone is so scared. Like especially with the stock market for 2 weeks. Like today there was just like a like anxiety report for like how everyone's feeling about the economy, and everyone's super anxious. But February and March in particular, a lot of March data isn't out. Like prices have been going down, which is funny because you know what else has been going down in price? The stock market. So it's like the two things kind of go down together at times. And like Nick talked about this like a month ago, like the stock market's a little inflated. Everything was inflated. So it's kind of like when we see the stock market going down and prices going down, is that a good thing? And we know that in late 2022, that the Federal Reserve increased interest rates. The goal, like inflation was really high, like 7 to 9% for about a year and a half. And now we're mad over 3%. Now it's under 3%. The goal for the Federal Reserve, for anyone who's wondering, is 2%. The Consumer Price Index is essentially a way of measuring inflation. It's the current way that the Federal Reserve measures inflation. And if you were to just sum up their job in one word, it would be, or two words, I guess, reduce inflation. Like keep inflation under control. Like it's the central bank of the United States. But to answer your question, like, should we be happy? Like, cautiously optimistic is what I would say. We know that egg prices have been terrible. However, I think in the last week of February, egg prices started to like stagnate, and then early March they started to increase. In February, overall, egg prices were up 58.8% just for February. Like the full reporting we have, like that's just so crazy. Like egg prices are so high, but we know that there's something going on because food was down 0.2% for inflation. That's with the increase. So I think we can be cautiously optimistic, and I think in June or July, like when we talk about all this stuff, we'll know where we're at. Like, is employment strong? Or is like inflation under 0.2% every month? That would be a great thing.
I think also if you look currently right now, live update, we've always talked about in the last couple episodes too, that the stock market always fluctuates. It always rebounds. Nick said it. Bradley, you've said it. Currently right now, it's already soared at the end of the day. Currently, as of 3 hours ago, we have a report from Yahoo Finance. I'm seeing currently on their tickers, like S&P 500 up 2%, Dow 30 almost 2%, NASDAQ up almost 3%. We're seeing a big tick coming back up. Now, is that sustained? Or is Monday we're going to get minus 4% across the board, right? We don't know. I agree with you. I do believe it's early. I think by the time summer hits, we're in the middle of June, July. I agree. We'll see if they're more concrete. Nick, do you have anything to contribute to the overall inflation report?
No, I think to Bradley's point, and maybe you misspoke. Price of eggs did decrease recently, right?
In March, it has. In February,
okay.
And for the whole month of February, it was up 58.8%. But starting late February, early March, egg prices started finally going down.
Yeah, no, I think, the question is, are we starting to see, like, is this the rebound, or is this just a dead cat bounce?
Yeah.
Or, for those of you who don't know what that means, it's, if it drops far enough and starts to go up, it might drop even further. Even a dead cat will bounce if you drop it from high enough. So is that what we're seeing right now? I don't know, but it is nice to see a little bit of green after seeing so much red. So,
yeah. Especially for you, Nick. And
yeah, he needs it.
Also today we learned that Nick's in the pocket of Big Egg, so he's over there twiddling his mustache. Man, I'm gonna get him this time. So Nick, I'm glad you brought that up. Not the big egg part, but with your insights for that. So we're going to check in on recession worries again. So Nick, I'm going to keep asking this again, probably until we have that concrete feeling of where we actually are. Recession. Are we there? Are we about to be there? Or do you feel optimistic?
Yeah, so if the two things that drive the market from like a psychological standpoint are fear and greed, right? In fact, we have an index on how fearful the market is versus how greedy the market is. Right now, I think we are the most fearful, at least in the last several years. I think that it was either a 14 or a 16, and it's on a 100-point scale. And so like the market is scared. And if you look at the fear and greed index comparative to like the S&P 500, when the market's scared, the market goes down. Like it's just pretty natural, And when the market is greedy, the price of things go back up. So when we're, right now, we're at the lowest point that we have been in. But when you look at that index, I promise you, like people have short memories and they're very quick to change their mentality because there's been 30 to 50 point swings in a very short amount of time. And so to Bradley's point about like egg prices, right? Egg prices are starting to go down. Tomorrow, maybe there's an announcement that, hey, tariffs aren't happening. Like, I think you get one or two more things that are like, hey, these are good news. All of a sudden that fear index goes to greed. And I think you could see a very quick rebound, which is what we've seen a lot of times, even think about like, back in COVID times when we had the toilet paper shortage. Like everybody was so scared there wasn't any toilet paper, but then all of a sudden there was toilet paper and like stuff started shooting up real quick, So I do think people are very scared right now. And so you might see, a couple of days or something, maybe weeks where it's still going down. But I do think there's very easy way for some positive news, a couple of things. People are like, hey, it's rebounding. People have money still, right? I don't think we're in a spot where people aren't able to. I think they're wanting to save it though because they are scared. As soon as they're not scared, they're going to put that money back into the market. We're going to see prices go back up, I think.
Yeah, a lot of headline guy here, right? A lot of times you hear like in the news, if there's a new tariff announcement, stock market reacts, right? I think there is some equation like what's the word I'm looking for, where you can identify the correlation between the two of, hey, stock market's dropping, people are worried, so there's that fear. So on the topic of tariffs, Bradley, so currently right now with where we're at, first of all, hopefully you've caught up with every tariff we have done recently. So maybe shed some light on where we're at currently. But overall, do you feel like that the tariffs that we're using are overall positive? Are they negatively impacting us? Because we've seen the stock market fall off and seen prices come down as well. Also, our jobs are coming. Like, are they on their way? Are prices going to go up and down? Give us some like designation where we're going, please.
So I made a video about this of like where are the tariffs, because they're pretty confusing. And I'll admit, like, you kind of have to actually look at it to understand where the tariffs are. So really quickly, February 1st is when this all started. President Trump said we're going to have tariffs on Mexico, Canada, and China. Those were the big three. And with Mexico and Canada, all of them, he said, were partly tied to illegal immigration and the importation of fentanyl into the United States. So immediately, China and Mexico, within the 24, 48 hours, said we're going to increase border security on their side of the border, right? So he said, awesome, we'll delay the tariffs for 30 days. However, China, nothing happened with China except the tariffs went into effect on February 4th. Most of the other tariffs were pushed back to March. Some of them have started already, including some steel and aluminum. Some tariffs on, I forget what the exact thing is, but they've been delayed from Mexico and China if they meet certain regulations of, like, are they made in North America for food or car imports. So the majority of the tariffs on Mexico and Canada are delayed. And I talked about this last week. I think that there's some political infighting going on behind the scenes that we don't know, specifically with Canada. China, however, is like a full-on tariff war. Like, we tariffed them, they tariffed us back, which they already had tariffs on us. So we tariffed them more, and then they tariffed us more. And then I think we each rolled
Reverse Uno card.
Yeah, we each rolled one back. And I do think partly that has to do with the state of the stock market and the anxiety level that Nick was talking about. But ultimately, like, it's not really making too much of an impact on anything quite yet. Maybe like some like Chinese products, like the cheaper plastics types of products, cheaper like bottling products, like maybe you feel it there, but it's very little. So like, how's it impacting us? It's not impacting us quite that much yet. Like, some people have reported that like their company is afraid of tariffs. Like, and this happened before the tariffs went into effect. Some small businesses are like, we're laying people off because there are going to be tariffs. We can call BS when we see BS. That's BS if they're going to lay people off just because tariffs were announced, right? You know, even if they didn't happen. So, I mean, like, we got to blame the employers and the tariffs for that, even if they hadn't started. However, some people are like, well, we're going to see more American jobs because of these tariffs. Like, there's good and there's bad. Like, from an economic standpoint, generally tariffs are just a tax, and they make things cost more. So is it impacting us? No, not really. Not too much. It's more like really negative sentiment on X and in the news. Like, everything, like, maybe not today, but yesterday, the day before, everything was like tariff Trump, tariff Trump, tariff war Trump, tariff war Trump, stock market tariff. And it's like, well, I mean, ultimately, like Nick said, if people are scared, the stock market might struggle. But if people are making money, the stock market won't struggle.
Makes sense. Nick, with tariffs that are, I guess I would say, impactful or not, have you experienced anything in your personal life that you can say tariffs have negatively affected you, or positively?
Yeah, so I would say personally, no. I think my own personal spending habits will adjust. If something's too expensive, I'll go buy a different one. But I did see two reports about a positive and negative. So I saw that Apple had reported that they were building new manufacturing plants in the U.S. because of the tariff in China, so that they can build some of their own like chips and AI things and stuff like that. And so that would bring more jobs and things into the U.S., which I think most people would say that is a positive. Now, there might be some, higher costs associated with that, which might get down into, the new iPhones costing, $1,500 instead of $12. I don't know what iPhones cost anymore. But and then on the flip side of that, I saw a conversation, well, not a conversation, a report from I believe it was the Canadian Prime Minister, that was talking about the electricity and energy that they provide to some of the northern states. And they were, going to cost an extra, I think it was like $400 a year for the average household. I think $400,000. It was something like that. And this was the part, I think, to Bradley's point, where it kind of gets a little political. He mentioned like, hey, we might just shut the power off so you guys don't have anything.
Yeah.
He's like, we don't want to, but we might. And so I think that's kind of a negative side of tariffs, is to, in Bradley's point, kind of that like schoolyard bully type of like, well, if you do this, I'll do that type of thing. So I think, you can't say tariffs are good or tariffs are bad. I think it's a little bit more complicated than that. But I do think that what people don't understand, they fear, and that is probably contributing to why the industry is so fearful right now, is because tariffs new, people say good, people say bad. At the end of the day, I don't know, I'm scared, I want to save my money, and that's ultimately going to cause the market to go down.
Yeah. It's funny, and Dylan, hold your thought, because I want to ask the question you're going to ask. When it comes to people, like what I just want to riff off what you're saying, Nick. People fear what they don't understand. I had an economics professor who said when they would have discussions with him in his class about tariffs several years ago, everyone said it was good because it brought jobs to the US. And then he said, I'm not going to tell you why, but all of a sudden someone started talking about tariffs, and then everyone started saying tariffs were bad. I think we can find the connection there. And I thought that was hilarious and a great representation of the public and the media about tariffs. 10 years ago, everyone, whether it was right or wrong, would agree that let's bring more jobs home and let's make it harder to make stuff in China, right? And then all of a sudden, someone started yapping their mouth, and everyone's like, well, I don't know. Economically, that's not a smart choice. So I just thought it was funny because you're like, people don't understand, or people fear what they don't understand. And that just reminded me of the story my economics professor told me.
Yeah, and I think just to be clear for the audience, like, we're not here to dive into the politics behind it. Everyone has their own belief.
Yeah.
It's just we're trying to make sure that, one, you understand where real, non-biased, where you stand in the economy right now and how to protect yourself in the future and invest wisely. That's our goal.
And I think to go with your point, Dylan, is when I read the news, like, it doesn't matter which side it is, like, they're trying to tell you that the story is this way, like Trump's tariffs. Some are the Trump tariffs are good, some are the Trump tariffs are bad. But like it's so like divisive right now that like you need to think about things. Like, think independently. Can they be good? Maybe. Can they be bad? Probably. Like, they're gonna have higher costs, period. Could they bring jobs home? Maybe. Like, we'll see how it works. Like Nick said, like, Apple could do it. So like sift through the politics, like Dylan is saying, to really get to the point of understanding this economic issue.
Yeah. I think if anybody knows Bradley and I in real life, we definitely have different opinions on some things. So it doesn't take a lot for having a civil conversation when it comes to this. So just stay calm, don't panic, don't sell off, and don't buy GameStop. I think we can all agree there. So just to go into Nick's point too, and I hate to harp on the Apple thing, but I did look it up while you guys were discussing it. I haven't heard that yet. And on their own news, like, this is Apple's website, their news section on there, it is slated to go to Houston, 2026 launch, 250,000 square foot server manufacturing facility. So that's fantastic. That's awesome. I think if that does truly happen on the time frame, tariffs don't change and Apple's like, oh, well, we're good now, never mind. Like, can happen. I think it is that's a positive outcome. And then if you have the other side too, yes, having your, I don't know, aluminum cans go up, because if anybody knows me, I'm a Pepsi Zero kind of guy. Don't hate.
That's the worst, bro.
Okay, 1 of 3. Okay, cool. Comment down below if you're a Pepsi fan. You're going to have both sides on it. I think, once again, until we can see impacts, I'm with Nick on this. If this can cost me $5 to go, I will definitely go to, like, Mio. Right, you know what I mean? Like, I am not opposed to that.
Yeah. And Dylan, with the Apple thing, Apple does a lot of good things. Apple does a lot of bad things. And just for one bad thing that Apple does, their AI is terrible and way behind everything else. Just for the record, Siri AI is garbage, compared to like Grok or OpenAI, ChatGPT, Microsoft AI. Anyways, some things that they do good is like that their current facility in where is it? Somewhere in California is like 100% renewable energy, right? So they do some good things. If they actually bring some jobs to Houston, like, I in a sense, I trust them to do like the good thing. And like, it could be like they're the biggest company in the world. I think they're still the biggest company in the world. So they're gonna do what gets them positive media attention and what makes them a profit, and sometimes they do what is good.
Well, Nick, if you want to throw some strays at Apple, here's your chance. But what are some other influences that you're seeing outside? So some good things to look forward to in the economy. What are some positives that you've seen outside of this?
I think From a positive standpoint, I think it's at least got people talking and kind of thinking about it. Because I'll be honest, to Bradley's point, I don't know that I've really heard anything about like tariffs or anything like that, but it definitely it does make sense, you know. And I know other companies are using it and stuff. So I think if nothing else, it's brought more attention to things. You know, I think same as DOGE. You know, I think it's brought attention to a lot of different things that nobody was thinking about before. So I think it opens up the door to conversation and to accountability and things like that. So I think that, you know, if we spend wisely, we're smart about, you know, getting our revenue in and, you know, spending less than we make, things like that. I think we're going to help improve the economy overall. So, yeah, I think, you know, good, bad, and different. It's at least got people talking about it and understanding it a little bit more and asking the questions, which I think is important.
Now, speaking of like government cuts, so I do want to say, regardless of where you stand on this, we are having government cuts across everywhere. Across the federal government, we're having cuts left and right. A big headline I saw this week was the EPA. EPA is making deregulation across the board. Their goal is to, I think it's called initiate the golden age of America is the headline. You make deregulation happen, people are able to go forward, like companies specifically, with revenue, lower costs of households. Regardless of the political standpoint, this can be either one of you. So minus that, do we believe in the past with either deregulations occurring, with having energy saving costs like these are going through, cutting the red tape essentially, how does it affect my wallet? Am I going to see positive outcomes? What's happening?
So I'll just start us off because you and I were talking about this, Dylan, and I did some research. If you go to EPA's discussion of their deregulation, I think the headline is EPA launches biggest deregulatory action in U.S. history, and they talk about what they're going to do. Just listen to a couple lines. Reconsideration of regulations on power plants, reconsideration of regulations throttling the oil and gas industry, reconsideration of mercury and air toxics. The next 7 lines start with the word reconsideration. So what is this big deregulation they're going to do? They're going to think about it. That's what I read, right? Like, we're going to consider it. We're going to reconsider it. We'll reconsider it. So, I mean, are they actually doing anything? I did look into this, and what they are actually doing, and we've heard this on the news, whether you like it or hate it, it's just what they're actually doing. They're cutting DE&I programs and employees. That's the money that they're actually spending right now, or saving, if you will. What are they doing outside of that? They're reconsidering old policies that they may see are bad or outdated. So to start us off with that is they're reconsidering, and then they're cutting DE&I policies and agencies and such.
Nick, what do you got?
You know, I'll be honest, this is not my area forte, so I'm going to let Bradley speak for the both of us on this one.
I'll go a little bit more. Just like, let's assume that they do reconsider some of this stuff. And you know, like some of the things I talked about, like regulations on power plants, regulations throttling the oil and gas industry. A little that is like, you can, like, the word throttling is rhetoric, right? That's not an actual program. So, I mean, if you're going to loosen up some of the regulation, then you allow companies to do more, to make more money, to hire more people. So whenever we talk about recession, when you ask Nick, Dylan, what's going on with the recession, prices are somewhat important. For me, it's the labor market, getting more people hired. This is one way to potentially get more people hired, is to allow businesses to do more things. One thing I found was interesting was there are regulations for states and Indian tribes, and these regulations basically say, they're called the State Implementation Plan and Tribal Implementation Plan, where you basically had to submit some sort of plan to have better air quality. So if you're going to have better air quality, If you follow these plans, the EPA has to read your plan, and then they'll approve some sort of funding or stop any sort of regulation on you. One thing that has happened, I think there's something like 1,000 backlogs between local, state, and tribal implementation plans, which means that there's potential money that could be going federal to local that has been stopped because of what the EPA says is air quality issues. So if they were to resolve these issues, that would be a good thing, right? For the local tribes and for the states, that could be a good thing that could produce money. But overall, like, if you loosen regulation a little, it's a pendulum. You don't want just people like dumping, toxic waste into our rivers and saying like, well, let's deregulation. We got to do what's best for best. But you also don't want people people not to be able to drive their cars because it hurts the environment at all, right? So you got to swing the pendulum and kind of find a good way of some regulation, not too much regulation, to actually sustain not just a good quality economy, but like a healthy one for all people.
That makes sense. All right, gentlemen. So that is the questions we've had for today for our topic. So I'm going to bring it up to you. Nick, you can start us off. Any insights, concerns, worries, or other positives you found with the economy, investments, or anything going on in your life?
Yeah, I would just say, we might still be in store for some rocky roads when it comes to the stock market. It's you never know when the bottom's going to happen until you look back, 5 years later and you realize it. So, we continue to say buy the dip. I think we are in a dip. Just, when you buy, it might dip a little bit more, and be okay with that, right? Understand what your timeline is. Just because you're, Bradley's down 5%, I'm down 8 or 9%. That doesn't mean 10 years from now that these were bad investment choices. Looking back, the stock market goes up. Average 10% every single year. So, if you have the time to be in the market, it's a great time to buy. Maybe don't do it all at once, do it in stages. But I'd say, don't be scared. The market probably will go down a little bit more, but it will rebound. It always does. It has for 100 years. So.
Yeah.
It did on this meeting 3 hours now. So.
Yeah.
Bradley, what do you got?
I mean, I've mentioned this a few times, though. The main thing for me is the labor market, and the labor market is a little unsteady, and optimistic at best, right? So we'll see how it looks. The labor market in 2014 kind of ended a little worse than we would have liked. If unemployment drops, that's a good thing. That's where really you should be thinking about. Prices of eggs are important. Stock market is less important, at least in the short term. But the labor market is important always, right? So when the labor market's down, it's always a bad thing, right? When unemployment is up, it's always a bad thing. When the stock market's down, it's like, it kind of stinks, especially for people who are retired and they see their money go down. But like Nick talked about last week, just wait a little bit and it'll go back up. But the labor market, as long as it's doing good, we can handle almost anything. And that's what the most important thing is, because it's always important. And the price of eggs is usually always important, but we can handle $6 eggs for a few months. What we can't handle, is 15% unemployment for a few months. That's astronomical, and that will destroy us.
So your main suggestion is make more jobs, economy go good.
Yeah.
Right?
Jobs equal good.
Yes.
Cross the I dot the T. Okay, cool. That makes sense. Got it. All right. So I've liked putting this at the end because these recession talks gives everybody anxiety. I started us off last week. Nick, I'm going to start with you this time. Give us a positive in your life.
Positive. I think I shared this last week. I am leaving for Kansas City in a couple of days. Going to go up there, eat way too much food, go to a little Dave and Buster's action because I'm just a giant child, and we're
Never
going to
been.
have a great time.
Oh, you've
Oh,
never
it's
been?
like-
It's pretty
It's like
fun.
Chuck E. Cheese for adults with
Okay,
a bar.
I know what it is. It's like
Oh, okay.
Andy B's, you know.
Yeah.
Like, I get it. I just never been.
I highly recommend.
Bradley, what do you got?
I will
Okay,
say
well,
about
I'll
Dave
do it.
and Buster's, I went the first time a few years ago, and I had always heard the same thing, like it's like Chuck E. Cheese for kids. There's a lot of kids at Dave and Buster's, and as a 35-year-old, that's kind of frustrating, because I want to go play games in the adult environment. But there are like as much, if not more, kids than adults, and I'm like, what's this? It's a for adults thing. Anyways, so my good news is it comes from bad news, but it is good news. So the siding on my house is like falling apart. Literally, it's vinyl siding, which pretty much means it's like crappy plastic siding. And we had a blizzard last week, which was just super gusty winds, and like our siding was already a little cracked and it started falling off. And now we have two giant like 15-piece panels of siding that are like flapping and hitting our house, and you can hear it like in Carrie's office. You can hear it's like do do all day
Such
long.
great news.
The good news is it's taken forever, but it's getting fixed this weekend. So, and it's so hard to get a
Fantastic.
contractor. I'm like, please just let me pay you $1,500 to fix my house. Please, I'm begging you. But it's getting fixed in a couple days. That's the good news.
Okay, fantastic. I feel like there's a lot of weird housing initiatives going on in Colorado, you know? I don't know. It seems weird.
I don't understand Colorado sometimes.
Classic. Positive for me. Had a really good facilitation session I did at work. As for anyone that knows me, I'm a store manager trainer now. I have been enjoying the aspect of learning the company again that I'm with, getting to know how to really interact with people and getting them engaged in content. I guess you can say part of this has helped as well.
Nice.
Or maybe it's the job showing through here, you know. But I had my first real life facilitation on last Friday, and it was really fun. I got to do it, and I got a lot of compliments on it, so it felt good to get somebody to say, hey, you're doing good. That felt great.
Nice. It's awesome, man.
Thank you.
All right.
And I guess one other positive, apparently the last like 10, 20 minutes, there's been a tornado warning here. Didn't know, so I'm still here. We're doing great.
All right.
So a lot of bad weather today. If anyone that's watching this on Friday, this is, pretty bad weather across America.
If the next podcast Dylan isn't here,
That's
we
why.
know why.
Oh, no. With that, FF family, we really appreciate you joining us again for another great episode. We'll see you next week. And we have potentially an upcoming guest, so be ready for that. So I appreciate everybody. Have a great day. Have a good night. Have a good afternoon. Peace.
Adios.